Imagine peering through an FBI microscope at a spent casing, from one of the most high-stakes political assassinations of the decade.
Right, the stakes are incredibly high.
Exactly. And you're looking for a fingerprint or like a microscopic trace of the killer, some kind of clue. And instead, you find a furry internet meme etched directly into the brass.
I mean, it completely shatters every traditional expectation of what a crime scene should look like.
It really does. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're pulling you into the absolute center of an event that has it's dominated the national conversation.
Oh, totally.
We're talking about the September 10th, 2025 assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University. And, if you've been anywhere on the internet, you already know the sheer volume of noise surrounding this case.
The conspiracy theories are just rampant.
Rampant. The social media outrage is deafening, and there's just so much misinformation everywhere.
Yeah, which is why we are stepping completely outside of that echo chamber today.
Right. Our mission for this deep dive is, it's strictly surgical. We're cutting through the shouting and looking exclusively at the hard science.
Just the facts.
Just the facts. We're going to unpack the actual forensic evidence. Specifically, we're looking at the ballistics and the DNA analysis.
Because we want to understand the mechanics of what investigators actually know.
Right.
And what they can't prove.
Exactly. And exactly where the defense is weaponizing those scientific limitations.
And to map this out, we're relying on a very specific stack of sources for this deep dive.
Yeah, what are we looking at today?
So we're looking at extensive reporting from PBS and CBS. We're dissecting the official legal filings. And we're also analyzing the official forensic updates from the ATF and the FBI.
Perfect. And right at the top, we really need to make something abundantly clear to you, the listener.
Yes, this is crucial.
The sources we're diving into today contain highly politically charged content. I mean, they involve figures, ideologies, and reactions from both the political right and the political left.
Right.
So we want to be explicit here. We are absolutely not taking sides.
Yeah.
We're not endorsing any viewpoints, political or otherwise. Our mandate today is to strictly and impartially report the factual evidence and the context exactly as it's laid out in the original source material. We're just here for the forensics.
Yeah, we're acting as a neutral lens for the science and the methodology of the investigation.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before we can get out our microscopes and look at the invisible cellular evidence, we have to establish the physical geometry of the scene.
Right, the baseline facts of what happened.
Yeah, and the weapon that left that evidence behind. So it's September 10th. The time is 12:23 p.m.
Broad daylight.
Broad daylight. Charlie Kirk is speaking under a tent in a grassy amphitheater at Utah Valley University. And he's in the middle of a back-and-forth discussion with a student.
Right.
And at exactly 12:23 in 30 seconds, he is struck in the neck by a single bullet. The shot originates from 142 yards away.
And in forensic terms, that distance provides an immediate physical parameter for investigators.
Like it narrows things down right away.
Exactly. A shot from 142 yards requires an unobstructed line of sight. It requires an elevated position and a rifle capable of maintaining terminal ballistics over that specific distance.
So they don't just start looking everywhere.
No, investigators immediately began working backward along that trajectory to find the origin point.
And they found a physical footprint almost immediately, right?
They did, yeah.
They traced the suspected shooter's path to the roof of the Lou Center on campus. Surveillance video actually shows a suspect crossing a railing, disappearing from view, and crawling into a prone firing position.
And they left behind tangible traces of that movement.
Yeah, like palm prints on the edge of the roof where they hoisted themselves up.
Right, and when they dropped down into the dirt to flee, they left a clear impression of a Converse sneaker.
Just a classic Converse sneaker print.
Yeah, and the transition from a chaotic public tragedy to a highly structured, cordoned-off crime scene happens in those exact moments.
So the suspect fled into a wooded area just north of the campus. And in that brush, law enforcement recovered the anchor of this entire investigation.
The suspected murder weapon?
Right. It was stashed in the undergrowth, and it was wrapped tightly in a towel.
Yeah.
But the weapon itself, it really threw me when I read the reports.
It's not what you'd expect.
Not at all. It is not some modern, high-tech, tactical rifle decked out in carbon fiber. It's a Mauser Model 98.
Yeah, an older .3006 caliber bolt-action hunting rifle.
Right. Our sources note this is a German-made military surplus weapon. It's, the kind of heavy wooden stock rifle that has been produced in the millions.
Right. They change hands over decades at pawn shops and gun shows.
Exactly. But as rugged and historical as the gun is, the ammunition loaded inside it is what makes this case feel entirely surreal.
Oh, the ammunition is completely unprecedented in this context.
Unprecedented is the word. Investigators recovered one spent casing that had been ejected, alongside 3 unfired rounds still in the rifle.
And what was on them?
These bullets were literally etched with inscriptions. And usually, if we look at the history of high-profile political assassinations, the shooter leaves behind a manifesto, right?
Yeah, exactly. Some long, rambling, ideological document trying to make some coherent point to the world.
Right, however twisted it might be.
Yep.
But this suspect didn't do that. Instead, it was like a terminally online internet troll's calling card.
It's just bizarre.
It is. So one bullet had a furry internet roleplay meme etched into it. Quote, "Notices bulge OBO, what's this?"
Wow.
Right. Another featured a sequence of directional arrows, literally a cheat code used to call in an airstrike in the video game Helldivers 2.
A video game cheat code on a bullet.
Yeah. And another had lyrics to the Italian anti-fascist song Bella Ciao. And the last one featured a standard internet troll phrase, quote, "If you read this, you are J.K. Mao."
I mean, we are looking at a bizarre amalgamation of modern internet culture permanently etched into lethal ballistics.
I have to ask about the psychology of this, because it feels like a monumental shift. How do investigators even begin to tie a weapon loaded with video game memes to a specific real-world suspect?
It's incredibly difficult.
Right, because it's completely decentralized chaos. You can't build a traditional psychological profile off 4chan memes and video game cheat codes.
No, you really can't. And that is the exact challenge modern law enforcement faces right now. Extremism has shifted.
From like organized group.
Yeah, from coherent ideological cells to this gamified, internet-driven chaos designed specifically to confuse the media and distract investigators.
To just create noise.
Exactly. You cannot profile an anonymous troll based on an OO meme, so the investigative strategy has to pivot entirely.
They have to look at the hard science.
Right. They stop looking at what the suspect wrote on the brass, and they start looking at what the suspect's body physically left behind on a microscopic level.
But here's the problem with an 80-year-old gun covered in internet memes. It tells you about the culture of the shooter, but it doesn't give you a name.
No, it doesn't.
To get a name, we have to move from the physical gun to the invisible threads. So let's dig into the DNA analysis, because this is where the FBI laboratory comes in and connects the dots.
Right, to the primary suspect, a 22-year-old named Tyler Robinson.
So what did the FBI actually find?
Well, the FBI laboratory processed swabs taken from the recovered evidence, and they identified DNA profiles consistent with Tyler Robinson in multiple critical locations.
Critical locations, like where?
They found it on the towel wrapped around the rifle. They found it on a screwdriver left behind on the Lucy Center roof near those palm prints.
What?
They found it on the rifle's trigger. And most critically, they found his DNA on the fired cartridge casing and 2 of the unfired engraved cartridges.
I am trying to wrap my head around the mechanics of that, because I get finding DNA on a towel.
Yeah.
Someone sweats into a piece of fabric.
Sure, that makes sense to most people.
Right. But how does a forensics team extract DNA from a smooth metal cartridge or like an oily 80-year-old trigger without destroying the sample?
So we are talking about what's called touch DNA.
Touch DNA.
Yeah. Which relies on the biological reality that human beings are constantly shedding epithelial cells, basically.
Yeah.
Dead skin cells.
Just all the time.
All the time. Every time you touch a surface, the friction ridges on your fingers, combined with minute amounts of sweat and oils, leave behind hundreds of microscopic cells.
Oh, wow.
And forensic technicians use specialized, highly absorbent sterile swabs. Sometimes they moisten them with distilled water to gently lift those microscopic cells off the metal.
But that has to be a tiny amount of DNA, right?
It is. So from there, they use a process called polymerase chain reaction, or PCR.
PCR, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's used to amplify that tiny amount of DNA into a profile large enough to actually analyze and match.
Wait, hold on. I need to push back here for a second, because the official FBI report says they didn't just find Tyler Robinson's DNA.
That's true.
They found multiple DNA profiles on some of these items, mixed profiles.
Yes, they did.
So if I'm sitting on the jury and you are telling me that 5 different people touched the trigger of the murder weapon, how can you possibly put my client on death row?
It sounds like a strong defense.
Doesn't the presence of other people's DNA totally blow up the prosecution's case? Like, Couldn't literally anyone else in that mix have pulled the trigger?
So the defense will absolutely heavily rely on that exact argument.
Yeah, we think so.
Mixed DNA introduces a layer of complexity that defense attorneys utilize to plant the seeds of reasonable doubt. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the mechanical history of the weapon.
The history of the Mauser.
Exactly. This is a Mauser Model 98 military surplus rifle. These firearms are decades old. They are traded, sold, and handled by dozens of individuals over their lifespan.
Oh, right. So it's not a fresh out-of-the-box gun.
No. Finding a pristine, single-source DNA profile on an antique secondhand firearm would actually be highly suspicious.
Like it had been wiped clean or something.
Right. Mixed DNA is not just common here. It is the baseline expectation.
So the presence of a stranger's DNA from, like, 1995 doesn't magically exonerate the person who held it in 2025.
It does not. Because modern forensic software programs like STRMix are specifically designed to untangle these complex mixtures.
How does that work?
They use probabilistic genotyping to separate the DNA contributors based on the concentration and degradation of the cells. They can often determine who handled the weapon most recently or most forcefully.
Oh, that's fascinating. And, if you're listening to this and wondering how prosecutors get past that reasonable doubt hurdle, it's because they don't look at one swab in isolation.
Exactly. They look at the structural integrity of the entire web of evidence.
Right. What makes this case so robust is how the microscopic biological evidence aligns perfectly with the digital forensics.
The corroboration is just extensive.
It really is. Robinson's roommate turned over private text messages to the authorities.
Yeah.
And reading these messages, it's like reading a step-by-step blueprint for the physical crime scene.
Yeah, they're incredibly specific.
They really are. The texts talk about retrieving a rifle from a, quote, drop point. They discuss leaving the rifle in a bush. They specifically mention wrapping the rifle in a towel.
Which is exactly how it was found.
Exactly. And there are direct references to a scope and to engraving the bullets. So it's not just that his DNA is on a trigger that other people have touched.
Right.
It's that his DNA is on the gun, and the bullets he texted about engraving, and the towel he texted about wrapping it in, and the screwdriver left on the roof at the exact origin point.
And that convergence of biological evidence and behavioral digital evidence is exactly what builds a successful prosecution.
It's layering.
Right. When the physical reality of the crime scene maps one-to-one onto the digital footprint of the suspect, the somebody else did it defense becomes mathematically and logically untenable.
Okay, so you've put the suspect holding the gun on the roof. The DNA and the text establish that pretty firmly.
Yes.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where the science hits a massive, highly controversial limitation.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you want a conviction for aggravated murder, you don't just have to tie the suspect to the rifle. You have to tie that specific rifle to the fatal shot that struck the victim.
You were talking about the ballistics bottleneck.
Yes, the ballistics bottleneck. During the autopsy, medical examiners recovered a bullet jacket fragment from Charlie Kirk.
Right.
And the ATF took that fragment and compared it to the Mauser rifle found wrapped in the towel. And the result of that highly anticipated official analysis, it came back inconclusive.
And that single word has become the most contested piece of data in this entire investigation.
Oh, totally. The defense attorneys immediately went on the offensive. I mean, they filed motions to delay hearings, basically signaling they plan to use this ATS analyst's testimony to clear Robinson entirely.
Right, leaning heavily on that one word.
Meanwhile, the FBI has had to step in and start running secondary, highly complex comparative lead analyses to try and, salvage the link.
Yeah.
But what absolutely blew my mind was how the media handled this. If you were listening to this, you might have seen a headline in the Daily Mail that literally read, and I quote, "Bullet used to kill Charlie Kirk. Did not match rifle allegedly used by suspect."
What's fascinating here is that a headline like that demonstrates a fundamental, almost dangerous misunderstanding of forensic science.
It's just so misleading.
It is. There is a massive gulf between the public's perception of ballistics and the actual chaotic reality of physics.
So let's break that physics down, because it's not like matching a key to a lock, right?
No, not at all.
I keep thinking of the inside of a rifle barrel, like a steel pipe lined with sharp microscopic teeth.
That's a good way to picture it.
And as the bullet is forced through that pipe at supersonic speeds, those teeth carve a unique barcode of scratches down the side of the metal, right?
That is an excellent visualization. Those microscopic teeth are called rifling. They're spiral grooves machined in the barrel to spin the bullet for aerodynamic stability.
Like a football spiral.
Exactly. And the unique scratches they leave behind are called striations. So firearms examiners look at the crime scene bullet under a microscope and compare its barcode of striations to a test bullet fired from the suspect's gun in a lab.
And if they match.
If the scratches align, you have a definitive match.
But here's the catch with my barcode analogy.
Okay.
Let's say you're at the grocery store and you want to scan a box of cereal.
Okay.
But before you get to the register, the barcode gets ripped in half, crumpled into a ball, and set on fire.
Right.
When the scanner beeps and says error, it's not saying this isn't cereal, it's just saying the code is destroyed, I cannot read it. Is that what inconclusive means in this autopsy report?
That is the precise definition. And to understand why the barcode was destroyed, we have to look at the kinetic energy of a .3006 caliber round.
It's a big round.
It is. This is a powerful hunting cartridge designed to take down large game. These rounds travel at incredibly high velocities, carrying massive amounts of kinetic energy. Furthermore, unlike military full metal jacket rounds that are designed to pierce straight through a target, hunting rounds are often designed to expand and deform upon impact.
To transfer maximum energy into the target.
Exactly.
Meaning the bullet is literally engineered to destroy itself when it hits.
Precisely. When a high-velocity, expanding bullet strikes human tissue and bone, it doesn't just stop neatly for the forensic team to collect.
Right.
It flattens. The copper jacket separates from the lead core. It shatters into fragments.
So the extreme damage physically shreds the barcode.
Yes. And an inconclusive result does not mean the bullet didn't match the gun.
That's the crucial point.
If the rifling pattern on the bullet fragment was fundamentally different from the Mauser, for example, if it had 6 grooves instead of 4, or spun to the left instead of the right, the examiner would have issued a definitive elimination.
An elimination.
Right. They would have legally stated this bullet did not come from this gun.
But they didn't eliminate it. They didn't say it was the wrong gun.
No. They simply said inconclusive. The fragment recovered during the autopsy was simply too small or too mangled by the impact for the examiners to find the required points of microscopic confirmation.
It was just unreadable.
Exactly. And to give you some statistical context, studies show that firearms examiners report an inconclusive result in roughly 20% of all casework.
Wow, 1 in 5.
Yeah. It is a completely standard scientific limitation when dealing with destructive physics.
But try explaining the nuances of destructive physics to a jury, right?
It's an uphill battle.
Especially when the media is already running with the narrative that it didn't match. The defense is going to hammer that word, inconclusive, over and over again on the courtroom floor.
Yeah.
It just feels like we're watching a massive collision between television science and real-world science.
Oh, absolutely. Legal scholars actually refer to this phenomenon as the CSI effect.
The CSI effect, yeah.
Because for the last 2 decades, we have raised an entire generation of potential jurors on television procedurals where forensic science is just infallible.
Right, on TV, the DNA always yields a single pristine profile without mixtures.
Exactly. The ballistics always perfectly match the suspect's gun under a brightly lit microscope, and the entire investigation wraps up with absolute, unassailable certainty in 45 minutes before the credits roll.
And defense attorneys know this. They know that if a jury hears a scientist say, I don't know, or inconclusive, the jury's brain, trained by television, automatically interprets that as reasonable doubt.
Yes, they do.
And if you're sitting in that jury box and you are told you have to sentence a 22-year-old to death based on evidence that is inconclusive, that is an incredibly heavy burden.
And defense attorneys weaponize the CSI effect masterfully. They will isolate that single inconclusive ballistics report and attempt to make it the entire focal point of the trial.
Just ignore everything else.
Right. Distracting from the mountain of corroborating circumstantial evidence, they demand a level of scientific perfection that the messy reality of a crime scene rarely, if ever, provides.
Because real-world justice doesn't come neatly packaged. It is inherently chaotic. I mean, you're dealing with shattered fragments of copper, microscopic skin cells layered over decades of history, and digital text messages trying to make sense of the carnage.
It's a puzzle with missing pieces.
Exactly. The prosecution in this case isn't going to have a single perfect smoking gun. They're going to have to build a narrative by layering this complex, sometimes contradictory evidence into a web that proves guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
And they have to educate the jury on the limitations of science while simultaneously proving that those limitations do not equate to innocence.
It's quite a tightrope. So we started this deep dive talking about the expectation of precision.
Yes.
We all want the clear X-ray, right?
We want the stark white line showing exactly where the bone is broken.
Yeah, so we can point to it and say, there it is. But what the Utah Valley University crime scene actually leaves us with is a physical rifle wrapped in a towel, mixed strands of touch DNA on a trigger, and the mangled fragments of a bullet that physics simply cannot piece back together.
The diagnostic waters of criminal justice remain deeply muddy.
They really do. So we want to leave you with something to ponder long after this deep dive ends.
Something to really think about.
Yeah. Think about the burden of proof in the modern era. And think about that CSI effect. In a world where we are culturally conditioned to expect science to give us absolute 100% binary answers, how will a real jury handle an inconclusive ballistics report in a high-stakes, highly politicized death penalty case?
It's a profound question.
It is. Will the lack of a perfect microscopic bullet match outweigh a mountain of DNA and digital confessions? Because when that jury finally sits down to deliberate, they won't be looking at a polished TV script. They'll be looking at the messy, fragmented reality of human actions.